Hi, everybody. This is Jen Wilson, and I'm here with my good friend Amy Vetter, and we're here today to talk about leadership issues facing the profession and something we call Leadership Lunch Chat. We're going to spend somewhere between 18 and 21 minutes with you, processing some ideas and welcome you to connect with us as we go here on social. We'll be watching comments. If you want to comment, we'd love to have you participate with us in that way. And we'll do our best to interact with those as they come in. So today, Amy and I thought that we would talk a little bit about this kind of interesting phenomenon. We're both in the change management business, leadership development, management strategy, driving growth and evolution inside firms and inside individuals in this profession. And we're both also in the change business as human beings. Each of us, Amy and Jen, are changing and working to get better. And we were talking about sort of what's the mindset required to do that, and what are some of the interesting roadblocks we throw up in our organizations and with ourselves individually that might inhibit change, that almost objections. And I was laughing with Amy before we started a little bit about this idea of people who say, I really want things to be different, but then you start talking about the changes needed to have things be different, and then cold feet appear and stories and excuses and resistance to that change start happening. And we're both experiencing that and always do in our jobs. It's normal, but we thought we'd process that. Like, what's the mindset required, and what are some of the roadblocks we throw up in front of ourselves on the way to get better? So Amy, do you want to start us with some thoughts?
Sure. So, I think just to begin, change is hardest to change ourselves than to change others. So, a lot of times, when we're talking about change, our focus is on others. Kind of, why are they not changing? Why do they not see what I see? That sort of thing. And change really starts with each one of us individually, and having that open mindset of there may be things I do not know. And I think sometimes it comes naturally to people to live life through curiosity. And sometimes it doesn't, because there are people that feel like I've been around long enough. There's really nothing more I could learn that would make that big of a difference. And that's a harder, situation to be in with change. And what, you know, I know in my life to be true is that no matter if it's been myself or people that I've worked with, change is something that happens all of the time and we cannot control it. And so whatever got us here isn't necessarily going to get us there. And in order to ever get to where we want to be, rather than sitting around complaining about our situation or trying to find escape routes, instead of sitting in the muck sometimes of change, it is really important to maybe think a little differently in your perspective, and what new idea or learning could you have each day. And it may not have anything to do with work, but what it does is start opening your mind to looking for things to learn that maybe you didn't know. Maybe you learned something from someone younger than you because they know things you've never seen before. Maybe you're taking a class on something that you've always said, like Jen said, of I'm not good at something, or that doesn't come naturally to me. And so therefore I can't do it, instead of could I do it? Where did that come from? Where did that belief system come from in you to say that you can't do it? And when we start practicing that ourselves, it actually benefits us in business and in any kind of strategic conversation, so that we learn to be more open to what other things we need to learn, either about somebody else that maybe we've worked with for 20 years and there's something new we can learn, or a new initiative or something new that's happening in the industry, whatever it is, so that we can lead people through change. But it takes starting with us.
Yeah. So, the leadership model that we follow is lead self, lead others, lead whole communities, and it's fun when we teach leadership. We're always like, hey, we know as we start to talk about some of the challenges we have in our firms, it's going to be really easy to talk about all the stuff other people need to change instead of here's the stuff I need to change. So that lead self, change self. And I was thinking about the barriers that we throw up to change, objections. Some would call them excuses or reasons. And I kind of try to boil them down individually to like, I don't wanna, motivation, it's called motivation, versus I can't. And I really try to help people look at the I can't, like how come, and is I can't really, I don't wanna, with a few, better excuses maybe, or is it really I can't? Sometimes it truly is a constraint. It is a true roadblock that we'll have to overcome in some other way, or we have to do something else first. But I don't wanna, I can't, I want someone else to, but when we're talking about ourselves and the Get Better journey and the idea of lifelong learning and the idea of getting stronger every day, and we should all be trying to do that. In my opinion, if you're not doing those things, you're getting older and worse every day. I mean that. It's either I'm fighting to maintain my ground or get better, or I am regressing. I am falling back. And that's how it is as an individual. The aging process, man, you're going to lose muscle mass. You're going to lose strength. If you also lose metabolism and allow that to cause weight gain, you end up feeling older and not as good as you used to, not as mobile and not as not as capable of getting up and down and climbing stairs and all those things. I mean, you get to choose. And not everybody has the power of choice. Some of us have circumstances. We have real disease or real problems that start to inhibit some of that mobility and things. But most of us can counter aging with exercise and with weight bearing exercise and eating right. And so like, what am I doing? Am I getting better or am I regressing? Same with at work. Life marches on. AI is happening, folks. There's all sorts of interesting business model transformations happening. Super cool conversations around, taking steps away from the timesheet and starting to have smarter and better KPIs and all these things that like, I better be reading, I better be learning, I better be going and bettering myself. So like, what am I doing? What excuses am I throwing up that make it so that I would allow myself as a physical and an intellectual individual to regress? And then also let my team, my organization, the entity, the service line I run, whatever it is it progressing or regressing? And what excuses or objections or reasons am I giving that keep us from getting better and pushing forward and changing? And it's all inner dialogue. It's all inner dialogue. Amy, it always is. It's the story I tell myself. And so.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure as we have this special, unique position where we go into rooms a lot and can assess very quickly the people that are open to a change in mindset and people that are not open. It can be through body language. It can be through the way they're paying attention or things that they say. And I think it's very important when you're a leader in an organization trying to make, because now is the time of starting to make decisions for next year, right? And we've got to start thinking about those things. And just because we've done it before, we've tried it before, didn't work before, doesn't mean we're in the same environment today, and doesn't mean that there couldn't be another way or a new idea to do it. And I do think, it is important to acknowledge history. So, if you're trying to lead people around you through change, it is important to say, you know what, we failed at trying this before, and it didn't work for all these reasons. And why don't you give me some of the other reasons it didn't work? Like, let's just get it out, like get it completely out of your system, because people need that point of, it's, whether it's grief or whatever it is, like to just get those feelings out and be able to share them. That's fine. But then there's a stake in the ground of, we're not going to talk about that anymore. We're going to learn from what worked, what didn't work, and then strategize on what are new ideas. Would you like to say something?
Just what's next? Look forward. Look
Yeah.
forward. Am I looking back, or am I,
Yeah.
like how much time are we spending back there?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important, because you'll never get there if there's always going to be a focus on that. We are living in a totally different world right now with, we've talked about it a number of times, but we're seeing the impacts of it now, which I think at a couple of years ago when we started talking about it with PE investment, it wasn't as clear on what those impacts were. And part of the reason that happened is because we wouldn't review something that didn't work before. We wouldn't open our mind to, what do we have to do now in this technological era? We wouldn't open our mind that this generation is not bad. They're different. They're driven differently, and they're just as purposeful as when you were in their shoes and people were complaining about your generation. So how do you get out of these mindsets so that you can solve and realize that the world is changing, and sometimes we have to go back to old ideas but do them in a different way?
The other thing I was thinking about, so that whole inner dialogue and that whole conversation that we throw up in front of ourselves, these walls we throw up that inhibit us from changing, that that creates sort of a hopelessness in the people around us.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am change oriented and change willing, not to say that it's easy, but to say, I'm willing to do the work of getting better, or helping us get better, or changing these things for us. If I'm willing to do that, sometimes when I'm around other people that aren't as change ready or change interested or change committed, it can feel like, oh, why bother? And we have to be so careful, those of us that are committed to get better, not to let those external mindsets that have an influence on the organization that we're in stop us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this concept of being unstoppable. Not only am I going to be committed to get better every day, but I'm going to be unstoppably committed. And I'm not, so yes, I have some naysayers. Yes, I have some people that aren't interested. We tell change agents all the time, let's stay focused on the future. Let's stay change ready, but let's also think about, what can I change in my little microcosm? What proof of concept? What pilot? What could I do to prove the value of the change? How could I begin the journey? Why am I sitting here trying to convince everyone else, or wait for everyone else, or feel like I can't if they won't? What could I do that would progress us? And one of the things that a couple of questions that I'm just finding myself saying all the time, or asking, and I've been telling people, think about whether you could ask these two questions when you feel sort of stopped, or where you can't tell where people's commitment lies. And it's what now, what's next? And those could be so furthering to figure out, like, and ask yourself, yeah, what, never stop. What's next? What do I try next? What could I do next? Okay, these things didn't work. Good. What do I try next? And then ask that of your team, and ask that of your clients. And what now? What next? What could we do now? What could we do next? And when you think that way, like, there is something to do. There are some things to try. There are some steps to take. And none of us is really inhibited from those. There's got to be something you could do instead of complaining or feeling hopeless or destructive sort of behaviors that we do, passive aggressive stuff, pulling back on my work ethic, or, just the stuff that we let screw us up because we're frustrated with others, or frustrated with the system or the profession or whatever. And I feel like real power comes from not being stopped. And
it's finding like-minded people that can help you in that journey. So sometimes we get drawn down and feel like, there's a lot of negativity. I think it's why we've always, gotten along as friends, but it's finding those people that inspire you, that keep you motivated, or are motivated even by you doing it, but will be a support system to you, because nothing you want to shift can you do alone. And you need to find those people that believe in the shift. Maybe they can't envision it. Maybe you can. Maybe you can help start creating solutions that you could offer up. However, getting those people on board that truly believe it, it's not just words, that will support, that you can get them involved, that they can be out there talking about the initiatives as well and being supportive of it, can make a huge difference in changing mindsets as well. If you just allow negativity to perpetrate and feel like, oh, well, like they all don't, then like the what's next stops, because you didn't push past, like, no, there's not a no here. There's just another way. And we have to just figure out who else believes that as well.
Yeah, I love that, Amy. And you're right. I do think that there is a power of self-motivation, and some steps we may be able to take alone. But when we do feel stopped, when we do feel discouraged, I love the idea that we're looking into our support system for that. And sometimes the support system isn't in our current work group. That's not where we're going to find it. We'll find it with other people like us in similar circumstances or disciplines, or people that have done it, people that I could see are already on the way, that I could say, how'd you get started? How'd you get around these objections or these hurdles? That network. And we have a whole bunch of really, I think, progressive, change-minded, transformation thinking folks in our profession. You'll see a bunch of them in a few weeks at Digital CPA if you're going. You certainly have Amy and I who are super interested in what's next. And you could always send us communications and say, here's my circumstances. What should I try next? And I know either one of us would happily help you with some ideas. Sometimes it's just you need a buddy to help generate or kick you in the tail maybe a little bit to say, hey, there's some things you haven't tried yet. I love that. I love the power of community in that process. But I do think that we have to be careful that we don't lull ourselves into this dull sense of being static and stagnant maybe. And, all this stuff needs to change. But I just can't change. That's your negative inner dialogue holding you back. And yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can find something to try. And like Amy said earlier, it could be something you've already tried that you should try again because it'll work this time. It's not always some new thing. So anyway, I really appreciate the opportunity to process this with you, Amy, and with all those who participate with us in Leadership Lunch Chat, because while I may be sharing ideas that I've seen elsewhere for the help of others, I'm always talking to myself too, giving myself a good, healthy, swift push, shove forward in my leadership work and my Get Better journey. And so I'm grateful to all of you, and you especially, Amy and Caroline. And if there are other topics, let us know. If you have thoughts on this, please let us know. Please share Leadership Lunch Chat with others, especially those that you might not think in this case are asking themselves the questions about change readiness and commitment to change and get better. So thanks, everybody. And I think we're off next week for Thanksgiving. So we'll probably see you in early December, I would imagine. And there might be a little lull here, but we might see you in early December. And then I don't know if we're going to be a post-digital CPA recap kind of conversation or not, but we'll see you sometimes in December for sure. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.